everyone, welcome to episode 9 of This Is Actually Pretty Cool. If you're new here, this is a web series where I am researching and cooking my way through a cookbook slash memoir. It's from the late 1990s called In the Kitchen with Elinor Donahue. Feel free to check out episode 1 to learn more about Miss Donahue and also about what you can expect from the web series. All right, so if you'll remember in last episode, episode 8, Mary Eleanor Donahue, as she was known at the time, and her mom have gone to see this free show, because they're kind of down and out on their luck. They don't have a ton of money, so they go see this free show. This is Spike Jones' show. And we are actually picking up right from there. We're on part 2 of that night, and I do be loving a 2-parter, so I'm very excited about this. Anyway, so in the book and also in the Archive of American Television interview, Miss Donahue explains like, oh, hey, there was this guy, he was an announcer, he was someone that was like warming up the crowd for the show, and his name was Richard Lane. He was also known as Dick Lane. And when he came out, to do his announcing stuff, Doris Donahue like grabs her daughter's arm and is like, oh my gosh, I know him. And it turns out that when Gwendolyn Donahue, right, you'll remember that Mary Eleanor has a brother and a sister is Gwendolyn. When she was doing vaudeville, because this is kind of like a performing family, she danced in a troupe for a guy named Texas Guinan, and he was part of a comedy duo where Richard Lane or Dick Lane was the straight man in that. So a straight man is basically the serious person in a comedy duo, right? So you've got kind of the wacky thing over here, and then you've got this serious person over here, right? So Doris Donahue was like, oh my gosh, after the show, we should go back and, try to say hello. And so they do that. And in the book, Miss Donahue says, Mr. Lane immediately recognized my mother in the crowd. He indicated for us to wait for him to finish signing autographs, whereupon he drove us home, asking Mother to tell him what all had been happening with us. She goes on to say, to make a long story shorter, he and his family took us under their wings. He was the only father figure in my life, and I needed one so much. He and his wife let me call him Daddy Dick. And his wife's name was Esther. She didn't say this in the book, but I believe in the Archive of American Television interview she does. So we know his name is Esther. We don't know a ton about his personal life. Like, I really did do some digging. I found, a Wikipedia article about him, and so obviously that has sources, but I couldn't find like an online copy of his obituary because he died in 1982. So I don't know if he and his wife had other children together, or if he had children, or, kind of what that situation was. But it doesn't really matter if he had kids or not, right? Because he came into the life of this 5-year-old who doesn't have a close father figure and stepped into that role. It sounds like willingly and happily. He and his wife both kind of stepped into those parental roles and became a second family to Mary Eleanor and to her mother. And Peter Ackerman, in his book, Mom, Dad, Me, and Classic TV, you'll remember that he is one of Elinor Donahue's sons. He touches on that starting on page 28. He says, quote, according to Eleanor, he and his wife were 2 of the most open and generous people in Hollywood, and they all but legally adopted her as their own. Because of Mr. Lane, Eleanor finally had a real father figure in her life. He was a man who cared about her, took an interest in her career, and made sure she was healthy and happy. He was a responsible family man and probably the best surrogate father she could have asked for. He goes on to say, after I was born, both life and professional circumstances led to the eventual drifting of this close-knit, non-family but family group. But they were always held in high regard by Doris and Eleanor. Though I never met Dick Lane, I feel as if I know him. I remember afternoons watching roller derby on television when Mr. Lane was the announcer. Nana would see him in action with his fast-talking patter and say wistfully, oh, look, it's Daddy Dick. This was usually followed by his signature line during the Los Angeles Thunderbirds roller derby games, whoa, Nelly. So he sounds just personally like an upstanding guy. And I will say that this is a theme I noticed in the book, In the Kitchen with Elinor Donahue, and then also in the interview she does with the Archive of American Television, Peter Ackerman touches on it in his book, is there are a lot of things where you look at it and you're like, oh, that could have ended so badly. Like, you could have been living on the streets, and, you could have been having to, do unsavory things to get food on the table or a roof over your heads. And so people kind of come into their lives and are really very helpful and very kind. And like I said, that does seem to be a theme. And I think I get the sense from the book, from the interview, from Peter Ackerman's book, that Elinor Donahue acknowledges that and is grateful for that. And so I think it's really fascinating because, like I said, you look at a lot of these situations that she's in or she and her mother in, or you're like, oh man, this story could have had a different ending. It very much could have had a different ending. And I think we first see that with, Richard Lane and his wife coming into their lives. Just a little bit about Richard Lane, briefly. He was born in 1899. He was born to a farming family in Rice Lake, Wisconsin. But pretty early on, it was clear that he had talent in the performing arts. Y'all, the wildest thing I learned about him was that by the time he was a teenager, he was doing this iron jaw routine in circuses around Europe. And I was like, oh my gosh, what is an iron jaw routine? Because I like to learn new things, right? You've probably seen it in like old-timey cartoons and things like that. But it's basically the thing where like someone has a bit, right, like a horse, like for horses, right, between their teeth. And that bit is attached to like a cable or a trapeze, something that can lift that person up in the air, supported only by this bit that's between their teeth. That's not just the wildest thing I've learned about Dick Lane. That's the wildest thing I've learned about any celebrity. And I also learned that there are daredevil types that are still doing this. So people, who are really just thumbing their nose at the dental establishment. Anyway, so he was most famous for playing Inspector Faraday in the Boston Blackie mystery comedies. He came to television, pretty on in its inception. He was a news reporter and he was a sports announcer. He did announcing for wrestling and roller derby shows. When he was a news reporter, he was one for KTLA, which was an experimental TV station. He was able to get that role because he had been working for Paramount Pictures, and Paramount Pictures owned that television station. And so when the station went commercial in 1947, he was a news presenter. The Wikipedia article says, quote, one of the early highlights of his career was reporting on the first atomic explosion covered by a television newscast. And so that atomic explosion was the O'Connor Plating Works disaster. So I just thought that was really cool. That would be like, being the first person to announce about, the Chernobyl disaster or something like that. Seems like he was a really upstanding guy. He was one of the first people to get a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. He was given that honor on February 8th of 1960. He died in 1982. He was posthumously inducted into the Wrestling Observer Newsletter Hall of Fame in 1996 and into the announcers wing of the Roller Derby Hall of Fame in 2008. He helped Miss Donahue get her first acting role through something that was very sweet. He had a picture of her in his wallet, like a dad carries of their kids, which I thought was really nice and heartwarming. And he was talking with people that were in charge of casting this movie that was called Mr. Big, and they were like, listen, we're trying to find a little girl to play this one part, but she needs to be able to act, dance, and sing. And if we can get someone who can do one of those things and they can't do the other two, we can't nail this down. And so Dick Lane said oh, well, I know a little girl who can sing and dance. I don't know if she could act, but that's how she got a audition for this and subsequently came into her first role with Mr. Big, which we're going to learn about in the next episode. But she says that the Lane's housekeeper, quote, was a superb cook and baker. Her peach pie would make angels sing. angels sing. And in her memory, our recipe is peach sugar crust pie. All right, for our peach sugar crust pie, we are starting off with some fresh peaches. She doesn't say how many peaches. I bought a bag of 6 from, you guessed it, Aldi. And I went ahead and used 5 for this recipe, but I do have an extra 1 just in case I need it. All right, so you take you take all of those peaches, you're gonna peel them, you're gonna cut them in half, you're gonna remove the pit from them, and then all but one of those peaches you're gonna go ahead and further cut up into quarters. The peach you don't cut up into quarters, remember, it's still peeled and, you know, cut in half and stuff. It's just not cut into the quarters. That peach you go ahead and crush, and then I just added it to like a large mixing bowl here. So then you're going to add 1 tablespoon of lemon juice. Obviously, we keep it super fancy here with our plastic bottle of, looks like Walmart brand lemon juice. So a tablespoon of that. Add that to that mix there. And then we are going to do 1/2 cup of firmly packed brown sugar. Add that to it. We're going to do 2 tablespoons of cornstarch. So just level that off. 1 and 2. All right. Cornstarch is everywhere now. That's fun. All right. And then we're going to take 1/8 of a teaspoon cinnamon, ground cinnamon rather, which is now everywhere. Okay. I mean everywhere on the counter, not, it is also available, you know, for sale pretty much everywhere. Okay. And then 1/8 of a teaspoon of the ground ginger. So let's do that. And I like that I already had the ginger from a previous recipe. I feel like, if nothing else, this web series is definitely getting me to like rebuild and refresh my spice cabinet. All right. So then we're going to take those other, those peaches that we cut into quarters, which if you'll remember, for me, it's 4 peaches cut into quarters. So we're going to add that there. And then I'm going to go ahead and grab a spoon like I should have before all this. All right, back. And then we're just going to mix that all together. I think maybe I was supposed to mix kind of the rest of it before I did the peaches, but c'est la vie. You live, you learn. Also, thinking about this recipe, doing it, 1, I was very excited because it's a dessert and I like desserts, but 2, kept getting a song stuck in my head from the 90s. I think it was like a one-hit wonder. But the only words I remember are, peaches in a can, they were put there by a man in a factory way downtown. And if I had my little way, I'd make peaches every day, and I don't know the rest of the words. All right. So this is our mixture. It looks and smells really good, okay? So then we're going to pour this into a 9-inch pie dish. And I'm gonna go ahead and say that 4 peaches is a good amount of peaches. You can see, let me spread it out. A little confused, but we'll see how this turns out. Okay, so, sorry, what I was confused about is, didn't seem to be a ton of liquid in it, but, oh shoot, okay. All right, so there's our fill, right? And then she says, the way this is presented in the book, right, is pastry for one double crust 9-inch pie. And so what I did was I thought about buying like one of those pre-made crusts like that are in the, metal thing, like you just pour the stuff in there. And then I thought, well, I can do better than that. So then I found this in the frozen section. It was already doughed up, and according to the packaging, it is flaky, and it also does not have any lard in it, which is good to know. So if I can get this off the paper that it was previously on just fine. I feel like this might be a two-person job. Oh no, dough down, dough down. Anyway, I have probably royally screwed this up. All right, so we're supposed to put the crust on top of the pie and just kind of crimp it. Oh, I'm so sorry, Elinor Donahue. I am really ruining your recipe here. It's just user error. It's not recipe error. Well, not knowing how many peaches, that I think was a recipe error, but that doesn't impact my inability to cook. All right, so move this over. This might be, I don't know, maybe I just didn't get enough. I mean, it breaking apart wasn't helpful, but also just isn't going. Tempted. I think I can make it work if it's not crimped for part of the way. Like, later on I'm supposed to cut slits in this to give it, like, to let steam escape, and I think we might be okay. Here, I'm gonna do this. All right, this is already not gonna be a pretty recipe, and I do apologize. So, but I'm the only one who's gonna be eating this. So yeah. All right, well, oh, here, this might work. Sorry, guys. I want y'all to know that I only filmed the recipe part of this in one take because, and I'm not saying you should be super impressed. Like, oh my gosh, clearly, if I'd had more than one take, we could have prevented this scenario. But it's because I don't buy enough ingredients to make the recipe more than one time. Because we're kind of on a budget here. So, okay. Anyway, this is what my janky peach pie looks like. I'm pretty sure the housekeeper at Dick and Esther Lane's house was probably better than I am, which, no offense to her, is also not like a super hard or high bar to clear. All right. So anyway, I'm gonna take this butter. We did how much was it? It was a tablespoon of butter, and we melted it. We're supposed to brush it over the pie. I don't have the type of baster that brushes, but I do have this one from when we made that. Was it the pork dish, I think? So I'm just gonna do this. At this point, I'm kind of just blah, blah, blah. Okay. Right. Move it around. I don't know if I should cut slits in it still because it's got a pretty big area for steam to escape from. All right. Okay, so that is about as awful as the crust. Now, she has sugar at the end of this, as the last ingredient, rather, sorry. But she doesn't say where to use the sugar. So it's not after you cut it, cut the slits in it or anything like that. It's not after melted butter. So I do think that's a flaw in the recipe. So what my guess would be, right, the thing that makes the most sense would be for it to be a topper for the pie crust, right? So I'm just gonna do that. Yep, so I did that. All right, anyway, you're gonna take your pie that I'm sure will look way better than mine. And you're going to bake that at 400 degrees for 40 to 45 minutes until the crust is crisp and golden brown. I think I've decided not to cut, more slits in it because, again, I think we have a place for steam to escape. So, all right, let's get to baking this. All right, so this is our pie. It's kind of janky because if you recall, I messed up the crust. But I had time to think about it while this was cooking for 40 minutes, and this is actually the first pie I've ever made. So in that regard, I'm proud of it, and depending on how it tastes, like, I'd definitely be willing to try it again and try to get the crust right. I do think I was dead on about like what the regular sugar was for, because I can see like it's in the pie crust and it looks really good. So, all right. I let this cool down for a little bit. So I'm just going to get some with like the crust and the peaches in it. Get more. I did, so when I was putting the dishes in the sink, I did taste like that mixture we had made, with the peaches, and that was really good. So I think this is going to be good, but it could always surprise me. So let me grab a spoon. All right, just a little piece right there, and let me grab just a little bit with like crust. Remember, professionals. Just like Martha Stewart does it. Yeah, so it's pretty good. It's basically like other peach pies I've had before. So I don't think it's different in that regard. I do wonder what adding more ginger would be like, because it was only like 1/8 of a teaspoon. So I wonder if adding like maybe even like a teaspoon of it would up the flavor of ginger, which I like ginger. And so I think it would give it kind of a nice heat to the taste if you added some more ginger. But I know other people are, like, yeah, a little ginger is fine. So anyway, yeah, all right. So anyway, our rating, how we rate things right here is, would I make this for myself again? Would I make this for someone else? Okay. Would I make this for myself again? And I kind of touched on this when I said like, hey, if it tastes good. So yeah, I would definitely try this again. Like, it was fairly easy. I think the most labor-intensive part was peeling and cutting the peaches. I think I was fine with the 5 peaches. I think if you did like a bigger thing, you'd want to do maybe more, but I think 5 was fine. And obviously I would want to get that crust thing under control. So I'd only buy... So I think my issue was that like I had laid the crust out. So I think it had time to get kind of like sticky. So then it was sticking to the paper and then it kind of came apart. Although I will say it was kind of apart when I first unrolled it as well. So I don't know. I don't know if I'll go with that type again, or maybe I really will just do like this, one of the ready-made, like already cooked crusts. I do think this would be really good actually with a graham cracker crust. So I might try that next time. Okay. Would I make this for someone else? Yeah. Again, want to get the crust thing under control. But I would absolutely make this for dessert. for, church or for family. So yeah, all right. So once again, we are doing super well on our recipes in terms of ratings. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed learning about Richard or Dick Lane, who, when I was practicing this, I kept calling him Jack Lane for some reason. I don't know who Jack Lane is. I don't know Jack Lane. But I hope you enjoyed learning about Richard or Dick, not Jack Lane. And I will see y'all next episode. Bye.